Welcome to Covenant Calendar, everybody. Uh, we're doing an intro for part 6 coming up. This is going to be specifically on Genesis 1, verse 5. This is an exciting, exciting verse. I am learning why that Yahuwah put these first 5 verses in place. The information that these verses bring on board is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm excited about this. The question I have here is, did Elohim establish a sequence in verse 5 that manifests even today? And the reason I'm asking this is because we have been taught that the Sabbaths start at sunset. This Owr Light series, of which there are 7 parts, it intends to reveal in minute detail, as much as possible, that light came first, not darkness. And it reveals the situation where the Sabbaths, each and every one of them, and every day starts at light. So we're going to go through these verses in the upcoming study very, very in detail. I hope you're going to enjoy it. So here's an introduction again for part 6. The previous 5 detailed Hebraics-based studies for Genesis 1 to 5 have clearly revealed that light starts the cycles of the week. Now, when we read light, we look outside and we see the blue sky, and yes, that's light. Very definitely it's light. Myself, when I read the word light, I think righteousness of the Melchizedek order, because that is what light is. Yahushua HaMashiach seated himself as the light of this world. When light was restored in Genesis 1, verse 3, 2 and 3, that light was righteousness. It was the righteousness of the Melchizedek order which was restored. Yes, physical light too, we're absolute certain. So in this topic of when does the Sabbath start, I'm going to ask you this question. When will you decide to start your Shabbat with Yahuwah's or Yahusha's dawn light, which is in accordance with Torah, and most explicitly, Yahusha's life example on earth? Scripture tells us that Yahusha gave us an example that we must follow it. His example was the dawn start of the day. So this is a Yahuwah's end time message from Genesis 1, verse 5. This is from Yah's covenant calendar. You see the website down there, studythecalendar.com. And a question here. What impact does ye are children of the light have on you? Those are the words of our Messiah. He said, ye are children of the light. Now, are you wondering why the T in the word the is different? Why is it blue? And why is there an underline from covenant pointing to this T? I'm trying to point out that the T is a Tov, and that is a covenant. It's a sign, a seal, and a signature of Yahushua HaMashiach. It is light. When he said, my burden is light, was that just physical light? What if he also meant, my burden is righteousness within light? So looking here in Genesis 1:1, and we're going to do a bit of review here. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim, there are over 200 references to light in the scriptures. This is a major metaphor that runs like a golden thread through these pages. The first Genesis light is the light of Elohim. He is creation's illumination seated onto the first cycle. Seated. Very, very important that we understand this. 1 John 1, verse 5. Yahuwah is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Light. G40 or G5457, pos, to shine or make manifest, especially by rays, luminous, in the widest application, natural or artificial, abstract or concrete, literal or figurative. And the KJV uses this as fire. Well, don't we read that Yahuwah is the refining fire? And what does fire have? It has light. If that refining fire does its work properly, it will bring us to righteousness. That's if we allow it. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim. Yahuwah is not only light, but he covers himself with light. Psalms 104, verse 2. Who coverest thyself with light, as with a garment, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain. When you look at that word garment, I hope you realize that that is in the very first word of your scripture in Bereshit. The word within the word sheet is a garment. That light is what cloaked this earth at the very beginning when his voice spoke to bring this earth into order. That garment was righteousness in light. Light, H216, or. I hope you remember this word, or, because you're going to see lots of it. From H215, illumination. Be concrete and luminary in every sense, including lightning and happiness, etc. KJV uses it as bright, clear day, light, or lightning, morning, and sun. In other words, in the beginning, Elohim is pure or. What is or? Or is the Hebrew word for light. Pure or is righteousness and nothing short of it. On earth, at this point in time, this is at creation in the very beginning, at this point in time, there was no darkness of any kind to be found. Again, we go to Genesis 1:1. It's such an incredible, important verse. In the beginning, Elohim created, bara, the heavens. He created. In other words, the heavenly bodies were called forth. The sun, constellations, and the other stars, and all the moons and planets, etc. The sun has or light. Where did that come from? Was it created? Did he create light and give it to the sun? No. Yahusha seeded his own light, his or pure light, onto the sun and gave it the ability to reproduce that light. He said, I am the light of this world. He gave that light to the orb of the sun for our light on this earth today. And what about the stars? Same thing there. He seeded that or light onto the stars. Now we come to an interesting one. What about the moon? We've been taught that the moon has light. Well, the scripture makes sure that we understand that the moon does not have light of its own. It is definitely a reflector of the sunlight, very definitely. And again, it's the same or. The sun and stars began producing their own seeded or light. This is the order of righteousness. Many times you're going to see this word order. It's going to be in a different font and it's going to be emphasized. Why? Because this is the righteousness of the Melchizedek order, of whom or of which Yahusha is the top authority. Again, we look at Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, Elohim created the earth. Psalms 33, verse 6 and 9. By the word of Yahuwah were the heavens made, and all the host of them, the breath of his mouth. but all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. In other words, the earth contained the atmosphere, water, and land that was seeded with righteousness in order to be inhabited. Does that word order, does that mean just getting your ducks in a row? No. It means a fashion of righteousness, purity was placed on this earth as it was created. It enveloped this earth in the sheet or the garment of righteousness. Isaiah 45:18. For thus saith Yahuwah that created the heavens, Elohim himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. What do we read in verse 2? When there was vanity on the earth. No, he did not create it like that. It came to be. If he did not create it in vain, then how did he create it? Well, the next part of the verse, he formed it to be inhabited. Once again, there is your righteousness in light. That is what supports life. The word bara, or create, that word does not show up again in the creation week until cycles 5 and 6. It is seen in verse 1, but bara is not seen in days 2, 3, and 4. There is no creating done on those days 2, 3, and 4 of the creation week. But on cycles number 5 and 6, once again, there is creating done. So my question to you is, have you considered this fact? How is it that you've been taught or told that the stars and the sun and the moon were created on the fourth day, and that the first 4 days or first 3 days of creation were not to be counted? Time didn't start until the fourth day. Is that correct? Is that what your scripture says? It's time to reconsider what you've been taught. Genesis 1 verse 2a is a verse that is very commonly misunderstood. Most do not comprehend the solid message of verse 1, that Owr, light, was established first through Elohim, and then in perfection, the light givers were created. Therefore, the mistake is often made and interpreted that the earth was first created, as will be shown on the next slide. So keep this in mind. This is what we're taught, and we need to question this. Some of our editions of Scripture has Genesis 1 verse 2a written like this: and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. Can we expect life to be supported without form and in void and in darkness? Did Yahuwah want to create a miracle of life supported in this contamination? Or is there something wrong with what we've been taught? Is there been traditions infused into the teachings that we haven't been aware of? So I ask you, maybe, is this the truth? What about our scripture editions that says it like this? The earth came to be, hayata, came to be in this state. Is that possible? Yahusha offered us his narration of this astounding event. Let's read about it. When the earth came to be without form and void. Revelation 12, verse 7 to 9. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And then we come to Luke 10, verse 18, where we get a description right from Yahusha. He's talking to his disciples. He's describing verse 2 of Genesis 1. I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Why did he use the word lightning? Why didn't he say, I beheld Satan come down as a feather? No, he didn't. He used the word lightning, which is a very destructive force. There was destruction come onto this earth in verse 2. And what does he say here in Jude? Jude 6. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. So when the evil identities identified Yahusha by name in the Messianic Testament, and in that they verified the dawn start of the day, can we not realize that in their first estate, which would be the kingdom of Yahuwah, they understood the dawn start of the day. That's why when they identified Yahusha by name, they in turn also inadvertently identified the dawn start of the day. They knew that from where they used to live. Why all this? What does this lead up to? Well, let's have a look here. Remember me telling you about this T that's a little bit different? It's a signature T. What is that signature? A Tav is a sign, a seal, and a covenant, and it's a mark. Did Yahuwah or Yahusha, did he leave a signature of his on this earth? And if he did, would that be the light in righteousness that the earth was created in? And what about this signature in verse 2? Was there a different Tav that assaulted this earth? And can we determine from the words in Genesis 1, verse 2, whose signature it was? Here we read in Genesis 1, 2, part A, and the earth was. Notice it's crossed out because that is contextually incorrect. What should be there? The translated to English version should be, and the earth came to be, hayata. Why the T emphasized in hayata? Because that word is identified in this process of transformation from the state of righteousness into the state of contamination. There is a sign, a seal, a signature, and a mark, which is the definitions of Tav. These marks were there in verse 2. Can you identify these marks? Have we been given that ability? Well, let's have a look. And the earth came to be what? Without form. That's tohu. That's the Hebrew word. There's a tav at the very beginning of that word. Note the T. Again, there is a signature. Could the without form, could that be a signature of an individual? What else was there? The earth came to be without form and void, bohu, that complements the tohu, but not in a good way. That's another signature of who brought this on. And darkness, Hoshek, was on the face of the deep. What about these three words that are given to us? Are these signs of who brought this on? Did they leave a fingerprint, if you will, on creation? And if it left a DNA style fingerprint, should we have the ability and the right to identify the fruit? I believe we do have the ability to identify the fruit of who brought this on. So what was the Ruach's rapid response to this contamination in verse 2? And the spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. We liken it to the fluttering wings of a butterfly. There was persistent frequencies going forth from the wings of the Ruach. What was it? It was a cleansing frequency of righteousness. The righteousness was being restored. The righteousness that had been assaulted by a different Tav, a different signature, is being removed. When Yahusha said, "Let there be light," it could give us the understanding, let there be righteousness. This vibration on the waters was the action of the Ruach cleansing the seed of Satan from off the waters. Righteousness was being restored. No, light was not being created. The physical light was being restored, but mostly importantly, the spiritual side of light, which is righteousness that supported life, was being restored by the Ruach. Remember, these waters had become a contaminated and defiled substance that could not support life nor cleanse. We know water is necessary for life and cleansing. Something needed to be done about the contaminated water. In other words, is the Ruach in charge of cleansing contaminations? Think about that. Yes, the frequency or the fluttering motion, you can read vibration when you go into the Hebrew definitions. There's a vibration or a frequency of the Ruach over the contaminated waters. This is what cleansed the waters. The result is recorded in verse 3. The righteous frequency applied on the contaminated seed cleansed the waters and removed the contamination. Righteousness was restored again. Genesis 1, verse 3. And Elohim said, here it is, let light come to be. And if we just simply read this in the English, we think, yeah, okay, that's very good. Light came to be and it was bright again, we could see, and light came to be. But what if that light means righteousness? Here's the command. Here's how I understand it. Let righteousness come to be. There's a command that pure righteousness be restored. And then we have the confirmation. And light, which is righteousness, came to be. Confirmation. The action of the Ruach vibrating above the waters, the cleansing action was brought to completion. Righteousness was restored. Contamination was removed. The seed of Satan was removed. It could once again support life through righteousness. So we ask here, what was actually occurring by the Ruach's frequency, that action? It was restoration. Restoration on the very first day of creation. Restoration of righteousness. Genesis 1, verse 4. And Elohim saw the light that it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. A separation. How? It was done through the frequency of righteousness or light. Yahusha said, I am the light of the world. He was restoring his character, his signature back to perfection. And light came to be. Righteousness was restored. The cleansed light, after the contamination had been removed, the cleansed light was then separated from the darkness. There was a division, a very, very specific division. Genesis 1, verse 5a. And Elohim called the light day. That's Owr. Owr, light, pure light. And the darkness he called night. You will learn in this next PowerPoint where the Choshech darkness, which had been purified, was now called Leil. Leil is what we look outside and we see the darkness. It's an acceptable darkness. It was purified. Verse 5 again. This is a very, very important verse, introducing definitions and what? Sequence. Sequence is the basis of calendar. Sequence is what this earth depends on. Sequence is what is portrayed in the Mazzaroth. Sequence is timing on Yahuwah's time, on his calendar. After naming and sequencing light and night, we read in Genesis 1:5b, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, one day. Then there was more definitions that followed. Very, very important definitions. We're going to be breaking this verse out in quite a bit of detail, and I think it's going to be very enjoyable. Yes, there are more definitions that will confirm with amazing clarity what Yahuwah wants you to contemplate in the final words of Genesis 1, verse 5. And there is much more. And he looks at us and he says, really? I say, absolutely. Count on it. There is much more. And we invite you to come and see. If you're not sure what we're talking about, come and see the full presentation in part 6. And if you have questions for us, look us up at questions@studythecalendar.com, or I should say, just ask the questions at studythecalendar.com. And I say shalom to you on this Shabbat. Come join us. We look forward to it.